OK, let's get down to business.
BBC iPlayer. Love what you find. Find what you love.
1, 2, 3, let's go.
Binge watch brilliant shows. From the latest to the greatest.
I know, and I loves it. You know I does.
Live stream BBC TV.
Welcome to my big show!
Find your next big obsession.
Can we just all calm down, please?
Just press red
I'll leave it with you.
for the best way to watch TV on BBC iPlayer.
On BBC One Wales, the BBC News at 6 with Clive, Myrie in Kyiv, Sophie Raworth in London and Rebecca John in Cardiff.
Tonight at 6, we're live in Ukraine, where President Joe Biden has made an extraordinary visit to the capital, Kyiv. Air raid sirens sounded, but the Kremlin had been informed. President Biden brought a message of solidarity, military aid, and defiance against Moscow.
Russia's aim was to wipe Ukraine off the map. Putin's war of conquest is failing.
The results of these visits will undoubtedly be felt on the battlefield, strengthening our troops and liberating our territories.
And we're on the front line in eastern Ukraine as Russia tries to advance ahead of the one-year anniversary of the war.
Also on the programme tonight, police have just confirmed that the body found in the river in Lancashire is that of 45-year-old Nicola Bully. Detectives read a statement from her family.
Nikki, you are no longer a missing person. You have been found. We can let you rest now.
Killed in a mass shooting in Plymouth, victims' families say police ignored warning signs and a licence to kill was granted after a gunman shot them dead in 2021. Strikes in the NHS intensify. Junior doctors in England vote overwhelmingly to take action over pay. And should Roald Dahl's writing be modernised, or is the BFG right? You shouldn't gobblefunk around with words.
In Wales today, the biggest walkout of this ambulance dispute, with more than half of Wales's ambulance workers out on strike. And amid contract uncertainty and a looming strike, we hear of players' fears for the future.
Good evening and welcome to the BBC News at 6 from a wintry, snowy Kyiv, where an American president has made an extraordinary visit to an active war zone. Joe Biden's trip here was short on time, just a couple of hours, but long on symbolism ahead of the first anniversary of the Russian invasion of this country. He said America would stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes and praised the Ukrainian troops' heroic fighting, while pledging another $500 million of military aid. Speaking while air raid sirens were going off, he added that President Putin's war of conquest was failing. Our first report tonight comes from our international editor, Jeremy Bowen, on a historic day in this year-long war.
The air raid alarm, as the two presidents arrived at St. Michael's Church, where Ukraine commemorates its war dead, felt too well timed to be a coincidence. With unprecedented security in Kyiv, the Americans had warned the Kremlin that Joe Biden was coming. He just arrived from a long train journey and a point was being made. Ukraine was still under attack. Its most powerful ally was there in an active war zone to show its leader support. President Biden told the people running Ukraine's war that this is where he wanted to be in the days leading up to the first anniversary of Russia's attempt to extinguish Ukraine's independence. President Zelensky knows Ukraine's future depends on America and Joe Biden.
We can and must make this year, 2023, the year of victory And I want to emphasize that this unprovoked and criminal Russian war against Ukraine, the whole of Europe and the democratic world must end with a clearing of all Ukrainian land from Russian occupation and firm guarantees of long-term security for both our country and the whole of Europe and the whole world.
Putin's war of conquest is failing. Russia's military has lost half its territory it once occupied. Young, talented Russians are fleeing by the tens of thousands, not wanting to come back to Russia. He thought he could outlast us. I don't think he's thinking that right now.
Strong support, but the Ukrainians want more than words. They want war-winning weapons.
The hard reality of Russian aggression has forced NATO leaders, and especially President Biden, into a series of difficult decisions. The biggest so far may be looming. Ukraine doesn't just want weapons that will allow it to survive, it wants to win the war. And up to now, that is a level of help that President Biden has not been prepared to grant.
The Ukrainians are pressing for a decisive upgrade as soon as possible. Time might not be their friend.
The cost that Ukraine has had to bear has been extraordinarily high. And the sacrifices have been far too great. They've been met, but they've been far too great.
Ukraine doesn't release casualty figures, not as high as Russia's, but still in the tens of thousands. The Russians are bleeding another generation of Ukrainian fighters. That is a big reason why President Zelensky wants urgently to convince Joe Biden to help Ukraine win, not just hold steady in a long war of attrition. The wall commemorates the dead of the earlier fighting with Russia that started in 2014. Each flag represents a life lost in the last 12 months. The Kremlin believes it will win a trial of endurance. Ukraine doesn't want to wait to find out. Jeremy Bowen, BBC News, Kyiv.
The view from the capital here, but what about the front line? Well, as the first anniversary of Russia's invasion approaches this Friday, fierce fighting is continuing in the east of the country. Russian forces are stepping up their assault on the city of Bakhmut, which they've been trying to capture for more than 6 months. Vladimir Putin appears to be pushing for a victory before this week's anniversary. Well, this map shows the latest Russian positions. They're in red and their troops advance towards Bakhmut. President Zelensky says the defense of the city would continue, but not at any cost. Our senior international correspondent, Ola Gerin, has sent us this report from the outskirts of Bakhmut.
Battles raging on the outskirts of Bakhmut. Ukrainian troops still defending every inch. Still fighting for every street. But the enemy is closing in. Near enough now for hand grenades. And for many casualties. He's asked if he can feel his left leg. It's okay, he replies. Then a desperate struggle to drag him away from the front line. Help us, he says. Ukraine may have to give up the fight in Bakhmut to save lives and resources for battles elsewhere. But for now, the defence of the city continues. We joined this mortar team on the outskirts. Keeping the enemy at bay on their section of the front line. Well, the troops are waiting now for coordinates for their second strike. The target is Russian forces in their trenches about 2 kilometres away. Day after day and night after night, Ukrainian forces here are battling to hold Bakhmut. Below ground, their commander Ivanko directs the strike with help from a drone. But smart weapons don't change the fact that they are outnumbered. How much longer can they stand their ground? Maybe long enough to deny President Putin a victory on Friday's anniversary. Here you get a glimpse of what all this is costing Ukraine. The wounded keep coming from Bakhmut and other front lines. They could be targeted even here, so we can't reveal the location. Most of the casualties are under 30, Ukraine's future. You can prepare for the medical aspects, says Dr. Miroslav. But it's impossible to get used to the fact that young men are dying who are fighting for the freedom of this country. You can't get used to it. President Zelensky has called this the year of victory. But the reality is Ukraine and its Western allies may need to be ready for a long war. Orla Guerin, BBC News, Eastern Ukraine.
Well, our chief international correspondent, Lise Doucette, is here with me. An incredible visit, morale boosting for the Ukrainians, lots of talk of defiance and unity, and the whole thing being over by Christmas. Hello, really?
This was, as usual, a carefully choreographed trip, right down to the last detail, right down to the blue and yellow, the colours of the Ukrainian flag in President Biden's tie. But when a reporter said to him, what's the goal of the trip? He said, we want to show that we are staying. But meanwhile, back in Washington, they're saying, well, how long are we staying and how much is it going to cost? Is that what his Republican critics are asking? And the opinion polls, Clive, are showing, not just in Washington, but in all NATO capitals, that while public support for this war is still strong, it is dropping. And all politicians know that. And also, President Biden's trip was also about sending a message to Moscow. But you look at the commentators today in Moscow, what are they saying? This has been a humiliation for President Putin, and this will perhaps even harden the Russian leader's resolve to press ahead with this war and the victory that he wants. One of his hardline critics said today that why is it that President Biden made it to Kyiv before President Putin did? And a year ago, a year earlier, President Putin may have been planning his trip in victory to the Ukrainian capital.
Indeed. All right, Lise, many thanks. Lise Doucette, our chief international correspondent. Lise was talking about some of the unofficial response from the Russians to what's happened today. No official response yet, but we are expecting Vladimir Putin to outline his vision for the war tomorrow in a State of the Nation address. But it's safe to say, as Lise was indicating, that he fully expected to be the president walking through Kyiv's snowy streets tonight, 12 months after his invasion, not Joe Biden. From the team here in Kyiv, it's back to you, Sophie, in the studio.
Clive, thank you. Police have tonight confirmed that the body discovered in the River Wyre in Lancashire yesterday is that of Nicola Bulley, the 45-year-old mother of two who went missing more than 3 weeks ago. Her body was spotted by dog walkers about a mile away from where she was last seen. Tonight, in a statement, her family was scathing about the way some in the media and members of the public have behaved over recent weeks, including accusing Nicola's partner of wrongdoing, which they said was appalling. Judith Moritz reports.
The Lancashire landscape has held on to its secret for the last 3 weeks. The River Wyre, snaking its way through the fields here, held the answer all along. What happened to Nicola Bulley? Now we know.
Sadly, we are now able to confirm that yesterday we recovered Nicola Bulley from the River Wyre. Nicola's family have been informed and are of course devastated. Our thoughts are with them at this time, as well as with all her loved ones and the wider community.
We will never be able to comprehend what Nikki had gone through in her last moments, and that will never leave us. We will never forget Nikki. How could we? Nikki, you are no longer a missing person. You have been found. we can let you rest now. We love you, always have and always will. We will take it from here.
Nicola Bulley was walking her dog near St Michael's-on-Wyre when she was last seen in a field on January the 27th. Her phone was later discovered on a bench next to the water. Yesterday, her body was found downriver, about a mile away. The area had been searched with sonar equipment and divers, but somehow Nicola lay undiscovered for 24 days. She was found by members of the public near to this river bend.
The currents would be very low, and a relatively large physical body in a water column would not move anywhere near as fast as the current.
Lancashire police said all along that they believed Nicola had fallen into the water, but the force has been criticised for its response and especially for its decision to release personal details about the mother of two. When the cameras have left this village and the posters and ribbons have been taken down, the police and the media will have some soul-searching to do, including whether the relationship between them had any influence on the way the case itself was handled. Bob Eastwood was a chief superintendent with Lancashire Police. Now retired from the force, he thinks it's been unfairly criticised, though sees this case as a game changer.
Can you separate out the way the communications were dealt with and the investigation?
I think there became a big beast that was hungry for information. People were going out for their own information. People were making things up. Experts were adding to it, and quite clearly, in my view, they were making it up based on no evidence whatsoever.
The yellow ribbons, still fluttering, were supposed to signify hope. Tonight, that has run out. Now Nicola Bulley's family know she's not coming back. The mystery of her disappearance ending with the saddest of answers. Judith Moritz, BBC News, Lancashire.
Well, as you heard Nicola's family say, they are appalled by the way her disappearance has been treated by some in the media and by members of the public. There has certainly been huge public interest since she vanished, particularly on social media, where amateur detectives took to sites like TikTok to try to solve the mystery themselves. Our disinformation correspondent Mariana Spring looks at why Nicola's story fascinated so many.
So why did TikTok sleuths descend on the village where Nicola Bulley disappeared? My social media feeds have been awash with videos speculating about Nicola Bulley's disappearance, not only clips of people visiting the scene, but sinister conspiracy theories denying the reality of what's happened. One detective at Lancashire Police said she'd not seen anything like it in 29 years. A TikToker was even arrested and fined after he live-streamed himself at a house opposite where Nicola went missing. There's also been a huge amount of media interest in the case, but it's this social media frenzy that really makes it stand out. Tourists travelling to the scenes of disappearances is nothing new, nor are true crime sleuths online. But TikTok in particular seems to be sucking in a huge number of people. As of Friday, the 17th of February, TikTok videos discussing Nicola Bulley's case and using her name as a hashtag had accumulated over 270 million views. In comparison, posts and videos using these same phrases on other major social media sites have had less traction when analysing a combination of engagement, mentions and views. Caroline, who lives in a town nearby and had been sharing videos about this on TikTok, told me she's seen hundreds of videos pushing false suggestions. In messages to me, she said, "Being a mum myself, I think it's nice to see people sharing, hoping it might just trigger someone to come forward. I also think that people trying to help search for anything that may locate Nicola's whereabouts is great too. Some of the things they point out in the videos make you think maybe they are onto something." This has had a huge impact on those in the local community who've been targeted. I spoke to Oliver, whose family owns the caravan park close to where Nicola was last seen.
Filming the house, taking pictures, printing our address, naming us all online. My 79-year-old grandmother, who at times has been frightened to leave the house. It's not a set. We're real people in this community, and of course, the worst of the abuse and torment has been angled at the Bulley family. And
TikTok said its thoughts are with Miss Bulley's family and friends at this difficult time. It says it does not tolerate bullying or harassment on TikTok and that it removes content that violates its policies. And this isn't just about social media. A significant number of people, well versed in online conspiracy theories, presented with a complex disappearance at a time when trust in the police is low, is the perfect storm. And Nicola's family, in their statement tonight, have directly criticised parts of the media too. Questions now loom over how the police investigation has been hampered by this online frenzy and how forces all over the country will deal with this next time it happens.
Mariana, thank you. The time is almost 20 minutes past 6. Our top story this evening. US President Joe Biden makes a surprise visit to Ukraine ahead of the one-year anniversary this week of Russia's invasion. And coming up, then there were 3, the candidates lining up to become Scotland's next First Minister.
In Wales today, with strike action still looming ahead of the England game, we hear of players' fears for the future over contract uncertainty. And former stuntman Jonathan Goodwin tells of his new start after being paralysed when a stunt went wrong.
A jury at the inquest into the deaths of 5 people who were killed by a lone gunman in a mass shooting in Plymouth has found there was a catastrophic failure and seriously unsafe culture at Devon and Cornwall Police in their unit that licenses firearms. 22-year-old Jake Davison shot the victims, including his own mother and a 3-year-old girl, with a gun he legally owned. The jury at the inquest said he shouldn't have been granted a gun licence because of a lack of medical information and his violent history. Our South West England correspondent Jenny Kumar reports.
This is the moment Jake Davison left home armed with a shotgun. He'd just killed his own mother, 51-year-old Maxine Davison. He then murdered 4 others at random. A short walk from his house, 3-year-old Sophie Martin was pushing a buggy with a teddy in it and holding her father Lee's hand. At a nearby park, 59-year-old Stephen Washington was walking his dogs. And 66-year-old Kate Shepherd was returning home from shopping. The gunman then turned his legally owned weapon on himself. Speaking after the inquest, the victims' families said their deaths were preventable.
We will never be able to understand or comprehend why Davidson did what he did. It was an act of pure evil. The system has hopelessly failed us. In particular, the Devon and Cornwall Police Force has failed us. They have failed to protect our loved ones. Warning signs were ignored and a licence to kill was granted.
Those warning signs were Davison's violent past and evidence of his emotional and behavioural problems. The inquest heard that the firearms licensing unit had an unsafe culture and that staff were inadequately trained. The victims' families say it's unbelievable that police gave Davison his gun back after he carried out this assault on 2 teenagers in 2020. He told the police he snapped after someone insulted him. The police confiscated this gun after those assaults, then gave it back to him just weeks before the fatal shootings.
On behalf of Devon and Cornwall Police, I am deeply sorry for the loss of those families and for the failings in my force that led to Jake Davison having a gun where he shouldn't have. My job now is to make sure that the findings of the inquest and that those improvements that we put into place are properly and sustainably embedded within that unit to make sure that nothing like this can hopefully happen again.
Davison's actions left a community in shock and pain. The families who lost loved ones finally have some answers about why he legally owned a weapon. They now want to see more changes in gun licensing to help stop further deaths. Jenny Kumar, BBC News.
NHS strikes will intensify next month after junior doctors in England voted overwhelmingly to take action over pay. The Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, says the decision is deeply disappointing. Our health editor, Hugh Pym, joins me now. So this is next month on top of nurses, ambulance workers. It's going to have a huge impact, isn't it?
Well, all of that added up, Sophie, it does look that way. Junior doctors is a term which covers quite a range of different skills, from the newly qualified doctor right up to 10 years later, someone who's about to become a consultant. And they're saying that now they have this mandate that they will walk out for 3 days, walking out both of emergency care and non-urgent. So that is really quite an escalation in the scale of action that we've seen so far. They got an overwhelming majority, they say 98% in this ballot in England, with nearly 48,000 doctors actually sent their ballot forms. So that comes on top of the Royal College of Nursing, who've already said that in early March, 1st, 2nd and 3rd, they will stage 48-hour strikes, again cutting right back on the level of urgent and emergency care that they have been covering up until now. Ambulance staff are planning more strikes. We've yet to hear from Unison what they are actually going to do in March, but it certainly will involve more strike days. The government line is that they hugely value the work of junior doctors, they say, but they're deeply disappointed with this action. But there's no sign of any talks taking place at this stage.
Hugh, thank you. Scotland's Finance Secretary Kate Forbes has become the third person to confirm they're entering the race to succeed Nicola Sturgeon as Scotland's First Minister and leader of the SNP. Kate Forbes is cutting short her maternity leave to vie with Scottish Health Secretary Humza Yousaf and former Minister Ash Regan. Our Scotland editor, James Cook, reports.
Only 5 weeks to go, guys. Only 5 weeks to go, which means just next month, Humza Yousaf could become the youngest ever First Minister of Scotland, as well as the first ethnic minority politician and the first Muslim to hold the post.
I've got a track record.
He says he has the skills and experience to run the country and build support for independence.
If you get independence as the settled will of the Scottish people, then it becomes a political reality, inevitability in fact. What we've also got to do is discuss the process. Now, the First Minister has a view. I have to say I'm not wedded to that view.
This is the idea of treating the next general election as a referendum in all but name. You've said there are problems with that.
Yeah, there are. There's disadvantages. Disenfranchises young people, 16, 17-year-olds. It disenfranchises European citizens and others as well.
His chief rival, Kate Forbes, has broken into maternity leave from her role as Finance Secretary to launch her campaign. She says growing the economy is the best way to win support for independence.
Competent leadership is what will inspire confidence. That's about propelling our economy to grow. It's about unleashing the talent that we have here. It's about ensuring our industries can thrive and flourish. It's about putting fair work at the heart of our economic strategy.
But this campaign is also about social issues. Ms. Forbes was on leave when Holyrood passed a bill designed to make it easier to legally change gender. As a devout Christian, what would she have done?
I would have been on record saying that I had significant concerns about self-ID, and I would have had those significant concerns about self-ID.
Would you have voted for the bill?
And therefore, the bill in its current form, I would have struggled to vote for.
You'd have opposed it?
I would not have been able to vote for the principle of self-ID.
You'd have had to resign?
Well, obviously, that would have been a question of collective responsibility.
Humza Yousaf says he'll challenge the UK government's decision to block the bill. Ms. Forbes says she would be loath to do so.
My polling, as it were, is based on conversations with normal, ordinary people over the last 7 months. And to a person, they say, focus on the NHS, focus on the cost of living crisis, and focus on making the case for independence.
This evening, a chance-friendly encounter between frontrunners who don't always see eye to eye.
Kate Forbes at the window.
James Cook, BBC News, Glasgow.
Now, don't gobble funk around with words. That's what the BFG, Roald Dahl's big friendly giant, said, and the Prime Minister has agreed with him after it was revealed that some of Roald Dahl's most famous books have been updated to make them more suitable for modern audiences. Details of some characters' appearance, weight, gender or mental health, for example, have been removed, sparking a fierce debate, as our arts correspondent David Sillito reports.
Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, a much-loved children's story here read by Michael Palin, featuring...
There was Augustus Gloop, who was always eating and was very fat indeed.
However, Augustus is now just enormous. The word fat has gone, and it's just one of a number of changes made to Dahl's writing to make them less judgmental and avoid words like crazy and fat. However, this rewriting to avoid offence has itself created an upset.
We don't seem to think children can cope with words like fat anymore. We have to protect children from distressing feelings. And I think that idea is causing all sorts of problems in society. You see it in all sorts of places, and we need to make children more resilient.
The Roald Dahl Story Company said today any changes have been small and carefully considered. And it's also worth noting there is a precedent. So this isn't the first time Roald Dahl has been rewritten.
Even back in the 1970s, there were already discussions around his texts. And for instance, the Oompa Loompas, which were originally from Africa, were already changed much earlier.
But these were English birds and they couldn't understand the weird African language the monkeys spoke.
The word weird has gone as well, and for some this is just about care about words.
We want our children to enjoy books, but we don't want them to be taking language that could be offensive into the playground and that could potentially lead to bullying.
I think children, they're very coarse in their talk together.
So, absurd censorship or just a way of preserving stories as attitudes change? David Solito, BBC News.
Weather now. Have a look at this blue sky. Louise Lear is here.
I'm not sure sunny is an offensive word, but I hope not, because I'm going to say just look how beautiful it was today. This was Norfolk, in actual fact, where temperatures this afternoon peaked at 16 Celsius, 61 Fahrenheit, way above the average for the time of year. We should, across East Anglia, see around 9 as we're heading towards late February. So how long will this mild weather last? Well, over the next few days, certainly we're going to see that mild air pushing in from the south and west. Now, this weather front will drift its way steadily northwards overnight tonight, acting like a blanket of cloud, bringing some outbreaks of rain into the north of Scotland. But look at the temperatures, 6 to 9 degrees. These are kind of temperatures akin to daytime maximums, not overnight minimums. So a mild start to Tuesday. A lot of cloud around on Tuesday, unfortunately. Some rain drifting its way steadily northwards across the Northern Isles. Not as windy as this morning here. The wind's easing down. Still blustery. A lot of cloud around potentially as we go through the day on Tuesday. Thick enough for a spot or two of drizzle out to the west. Top temperatures around 12 or 13 degrees as a maximum. Perhaps not as warm as today because there'll be a little bit more sunshine, a little more cloud to go round. Now, as we move out of Tuesday into Wednesday, we've got weather fronts starting to push in from the west, and it's a cold front. So gradually behind it, some colder air will start to squeeze its way south and east. Not too cold, but nevertheless a change to the story. It's going to be more cloud around and some showery outbreaks of rain sinking south and east to begin with on Wednesday, brightening up behind, a few scattered showers, and some of these will start to turn a little bit wintry to the tops of the mountains. Cooler here, 7 to 8 degrees, perhaps temperatures 11 Celsius as we go through the southeast in the middle of the afternoon. Now, as we push towards Thursday, we've got this ridge of high pressure building in. So England and Wales will be drier but cooler, as you can see, 8 or 9 degrees. The outbreaks of rain continue into the far northwest. But even so, these temperatures pretty much where they should be for this time of year. Sophie.
Louise, thank you very much. And that's it from the BBC News at 6. The news continues, of course, on BBC One because it's time to join our colleagues across the nations and regions for the news where you are. Goodbye.